After the precarious yet successful Allied amphibious landings on the beaches of Normandy and the rapid liberation of France and Belgium from the dark grip of Nazi Germany, the Allies faced the very daunting task of directly attacking the German fatherland. Several plans were proposed by Allied generals, though ultimately an audacious and massive ground and airborne attack was planned with the aim to stab through the German defenses in the Netherlands, capturing several key bridges, and finally attempt to breach the German line across the lower Rhine River at the city of Arnhem. But this final objective would prove to be a bridge too far. So why was this massive air and land operation carried out? And how did it shape the rest of the war? Well, to better understand this, we must go back to the pre-D-Day invasion plans. The Supreme Headquarters Allied Expeditionary Force, also known as SHAEF, was created in late 1943, with General Dwight D. Eisenhower designated its commander. Its purpose was to create a central command over all Allied forces fighting in Europe. Even before General Eisenhower was appointed Supreme Commander, the plans for D-Day had been in the planning stages, with the outline plan created by British Lieutenant General Frederick E. Morgan and U.S. Army Major General Ray Barker. The plans were started in mid-March 1943 and would eventually see many changes until the actual D-Day on the 6th of June 1944. General Eisenhower is considered a great strategist, but he was equally an impressive diplomat, being able to work at the highest levels with U.S. President Roosevelt and Prime Minister Churchill, while also being able to navigate the intricate personalities of his subordinate field generals. In his role as Supreme Commander, Eisenhower had to answer to higher authorities, and therefore at times he had to make uncomfortable decisions to both appease his superiors and his army generals. That was the brilliance of Eisenhower. As the campaign of D-Day came to a successful conclusion, the commanders lay sight to the liberation of Paris and the rest of France. The tiny foothold on the beaches of Normandy had become a tidal wave of Allied forces taking back Germany's conquered lands and people. General George S. Patton, who had been sidelined during the Normandy invasion, was given command of the new U.S. Third Army, which became operational on the 1st of August 1944. The Third Army simultaneously attacked west into Brittany, southeast toward the Seine, and north, assisting in trapping several 100,000 German soldiers in the Falaise pocket between Falaise and Argentan. The speed of the advance forced Patton's units to rely heavily on air reconnaissance and tactical air support. The Third Army had by far more military intelligence officers at headquarters specifically designated to coordinate airstrikes than any other army. Patton's Third Army was sent to Lorraine, but despite its proximity to Germany, the Lorraine region was not the Allies' preferred invasion route in 1944. Except for its cities of Nancy and Metz, the region contained few significant military objectives. Once the Third Army had penetrated Lorraine, there would still be no first-rate military objectives on entering Germany. The Saar's industrial importance region, while significant, was of secondary when compared to the Great Ruhr industrial complex farther north. Thus, Patton's lightning offensive came to a halt on the 31st of August 1944, just 30 days after his Third Army had been unleashed, in part blamed on fuel shortages, though mostly over the overall theater strategies. You won't believe what happened next. Don't forget to subscribe and hit that like button. Indeed, the Third Army ran out of fuel near the Moselle River, just outside Metz. Patton expected that the theater commander would keep fuel and supplies flowing to support his advance, but Eisenhower favored a broad front approach to the ground war effort, believing that a single thrust would expose his flanks and could quickly lose its punch. On the 1st of September 1944, there would be a major shakeup in the command structure of the European theater. On this day, the Supreme Allied Commander General Dwight D. Eisenhower would take over command of all ground forces, which had previously been Field Marshal Montgomery's role. It was at this time that two different attack strategies began to develop. Field Marshal Montgomery, who was in command of armies in the north, had the task of liberating Belgium and seizing the all-important city of Antwerp. He proposed a single thrust into the heart of Germany across the Rhine that would require the whole of resources of the Allied armies, which would have relegated Generals Bradley and Patton commanding U.S. forces to the south to a static force. On the other hand, Patton demanded more fuel for his mechanized army, stating that with 400,000 gallons of gasoline, he could be in Germany in 2 days. Both the British and American Army commanders' plans were considered logistically unfeasible and not tactically sound. Eisenhower, on his part, knew that he would have to give Montgomery, Bradley, and Patton some direction, so he continued with the broad front strategy, sending more fuel resources to Patton by early September to keep his army moving. But then, something else happened. The Germans had begun deployment of the V-2 rockets to the Netherlands and had started launching daily strikes against London. The British wanted these neutralized, and Montgomery proposed a solution: Operation Comet. This operation was envisioned as a limited strike against several key bridges along the route to the Rhine to be undertaken by the British and Polish airborne troops. But bad weather and an ever-increasing number of German resistance caused Montgomery to first postpone and then cancel the operation on the 10th of September, 1944. Montgomery replaced Operation Comet with Operation Market Garden, an even more ambitious plan to entirely bypass the West Wall, or Siegfried Line, of German defenses by hooking around its northern end and securing a crossing of the Rhine River, thereby gaining a path to the Ruhr Valley. On the 10th of September, General Dempsey, the British Second Army commander, told Montgomery that he had doubts about this new Market Garden plan. Montgomery's response was simply that he had just received an order from the British government that the V-2 launch sites around The Hague should be neutralized and that the plan must therefore proceed. And then Eisenhower proceeded to consent to Operation Market Garden, giving it limited priority in terms of supply, but only as part of a broader front attack, and if the use of the U.S. airborne divisions could be included in the plan. Operation Market Garden had two elements. The airborne assaults would be carried out by U.S. Lieutenant Lewis H. Brereton's 1st Allied Airborne Army, consisting of 4 airborne groups, while the British Second Army would move north along a narrow, winding road spearheaded by 30th Corps under British Lieutenant General Brian Horrocks. The airborne phase of the operation, known as Market, would employ 4 of the 6 divisions of the 1st Allied Airborne Army. The U.S. 101st Airborne Division, under Major General Maxwell D. Taylor, would drop in 2 locations just north of 30th Corps to take the bridges north of Eindhoven at Soane and Wegel. The 82nd Airborne Division, under Brigadier General James M. Gavin, would drop northeast of them to take the bridges at Graaf and Nijmegen, and the British 1st Airborne Division, under Major General Roy Urquhart, with the Polish 1st Independent Parachute Brigade, under Major General Stanislaw Sosabowski, would drop at the extreme north end of the route, capturing the road bridge at Arnhem and the rail bridge at Oosterbeek. The 52nd Lowland Infantry Division would be flown to the captured Deelen Airfield on D+5. There simply were not enough C-47 transport planes to carry all the parachute troops and tow the gliders, requiring that the operation have 2 airlifts, which would take place on separate days. 90% of the U.S. Army Air Force transports on the first day would drop parachute troops, with the same proportion towing gliders on the second day. The RAF transports were almost entirely used for glider operations. The ground operations seemed more straightforward. The 30th Corps would be spearheaded by the Guards Armored Division, with the 43rd Wessex and 50th Northumbrian Infantry Divisions in reserve. The armor units would have overwhelming air support, clearing away enemy units and emplacements, and allowing the armor column to swiftly advance up the road and linking with the airborne elements at each bridge. The distance between the British Second Army and the final bridge at Arnhem was about 60 miles or 100 kilometers. This army column was expected to arrive at the south end of the 101st Airborne Division's area on the first day between Eindhoven to Soane, then make it to the 82nd's area by the second day between Graaf and Nijmegen, and finally arrive at the British Airborne area in Arnhem by the 4th day. Then the airborne divisions would join the 30th Corps in a breakout from the Arnhem bridgehead. That was the plan. The British 30th Corps would need to move at least 15 miles or 25 kilometers each day, leaving the British and Polish airborne troops to fight in Arnhem, mostly unsupported, for 4 days. I hope you enjoyed this part 1 of Operation Market Garden. Videos like this take a long time to research and make, so I hope that you will help me out and hit that like button and leave a comment while you're at it. And subscribe to the channel so that others like you can find this video in the sea of YouTube videos. Thank you for watching. I will have part 2 in a few days, which will lay out the entire battle. Catch you on the next one.